Iconic Tour Guides. I'm Carrie.
I'm Catherine.
And I'm Bree.
And today we are taking you on a tour of London. All three of us are very partial to London because we've actually all been there.
Actually, Bree and I were there together one time, but it's my favorite city, and I've been 4 times now, so I love getting any chance I can to go.
I was also really young, so I don't really remember it except for a few highlights, but it's still fun. Our first stop is the bar. To kick this off, I love gin drinks, so I had to start off with this iconic gin-based drink, the Collins. There are 2 parts to the origin story of the Collins. We'll start in London and then travel to New York. The Collins originated at the Mayfair during the 1830s by John Collins, who was a bartender at the coffee house. The Collins originated in Mayfair during the 1830s by John Collins, who was a bartender at the coffee house, which is in Limmer's Hotel on Conduit Street. That's important. Side note, Limmer's Hotel was noted as being one of the dirtiest in London. Very Sweeney Todd, hashtag the worst pies in London. Anyway, John Collins decided to make his own version of a gin punch, which was a very popular drink at the time. I tried to look up the classic gin punch, and there are a dozen variations, so it was a bit of a dead end to try to find the original. But an 1892 book called Drinks of the World sealed the original story of the Collins through this limerick. Catherine, would you like to read that for us?
Oh boy. My name is John Collins, head waiter at Limmer's, corner of Conduit Street. Hanover Square, my chief occupation is filling Burmers for all the young gentlemen frequenters there.
Thank you. Follow me now to New York in the 1870s for part 2. They called this the Great Tom Collins Hoax of 1874. Basically, the hoax was a bartender telling a customer that another guy named Tom Collins had been talking bad about him.
From Rent.
Hey. The bartender waited until the customer got worked up and told him that Tom Collins could be found at another nearby bar. When the customer went to this bar and asked for Tom Collins, he was given this drink. After doing a little research, there is actually a difference between a John and a Tom Collins. As a gin drinker, I didn't actually know this until very recently. I was looking to buy a bottle of gin for my home bar, and I learned that there are actually 4 types of gin. For our cocktail today, I went for a London Dry, which is used in neither a John or Tom Collins. It is used in a Carrie Collins.
Yay!
Anyway, the John Collins uses a Genever gin, which is a malted gin, so it's really robust and malty. And it doesn't have as much juniper in the flavor, whereas the Tom Collins uses an Old Tom, hey, maybe that's where the name comes from, style gin that's richer in flavor than the standard London Dry. But it's not quite as bold as the Genever. Old Tom gin is actually nicknamed bathtub gin because people would make it on their own, presumably in their bathtubs.
Ew.
And it's usually a bit sweeter. That was awesome. But don't worry, it's not made in bathtubs anymore. So the recipe for a Collins is 50 milliliters of gin. Yes, hello London, we use milliliters. 25 milliliters of fresh lemon juice. 10 milliliters of simple syrup or sugar syrup. You shake it all up with ice and then top it off with soda water.
And it's delicious. We have our Collins right here. And cheers, mate. So my job is food. I am not a professional chef. I have never done any sort of culinary training. I just like to eat a lot. So I volunteered to make our meals that are going to go along with each of our cities. So for London, I went with my favorite thing to do as soon as I get to London, and we're having a traditional English fry-up. So when you make a fry-up, it varies greatly by region, and because of the coronavirus and the fact that I live in Texas, some of the ingredients weren't the easiest to find. Shockingly, I couldn't find black pudding anywhere. So what we have for our English fry up, aka Texas fry up. We had fried eggs, toast, sauteed mushrooms, grilled tomatoes, baked beans, and I couldn't find the kind of tomato tango-y kind of London-y ones. So we just had regular baked beans, but we tried our best.
They were so delicious.
Thank you. Bacon and sausage. And in London, that would normally be accompanied with tea and blood pudding. And if you go to different regions, they add cheese. They add Irish soda bread, just depending on where you are. But it's a really common breakfast that's served all day in a lot of places because it's really great for when you are drinking. Hence, a perfect meal for our first recording.
Okay. Well, this is Brie, and today I'm going to take you on a tour of some of the potentially lesser known, not to mention delightfully dark, sites in London, mixed in with a bit of London's lore along the way. Our first stop is Crossbones Graveyard, also referred to as the Single Woman's Churchyard. This unconsecrated ground is the final resting place of thousands of London's prostitutes, as well as a number of the poor and criminals who weren't allowed to be buried on consecrated ground.
Aww.
Most died from common diseases at the time: scurvy, smallpox, tuberculosis, the fun stuff. In fact, there were so many bodies that the land became too full with the dead. Bodies were even buried on top of each other, so the burial ground was left undisturbed until an excavation in the 90s revealed that a significant percentage, potentially more than half if the numbers are to be believed, of the dead were young children and infants. So our next stop are the plague pits. Most people have heard about the Black Death of 1348, and others still have heard about the Great Plague of 1665, but most people don't realize that there were actually dozens of outbreaks in London from the years spanning 1348 to 1665, with occurrences about every 20 years or so. Think about that. That means that provided you survived childhood, because high infant mortality rates, you would have lived through at least one of those outbreaks, or not, if you lived any time between the mid-14th century.
They didn't live through them.
No.
They didn't live through them. That's
If
the
they
problem.
were the survivors, they did. They just saw everybody else die.
Aww.
Hello, depressing. So, yeah. Now, I think a common misconception when it comes to the plague, especially the Black Death, is that the infected would develop these, black lumps, or, certain parts of their bodies would turn black and all nasty looking. Actually, I learned that this was not the case with the Black Death, if that's what the bubonic plague actually was, which is the plague that they believed it to be at the time. In fact, the name Black Death was not even assigned to the outbreak in the mid-14th century until centuries after the fact, and it may have been a mistranslation, because medieval people actually referred to it as the Great Pestilence. According to the CDC, we're getting real fun here, guys, there are 3 forms of plague: bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic. And it's actually septicemic plague that can cause some tissues and skin to turn black, particularly the extremities, like your toes, nose, all that good stuff.
Ew.
Yeah. And in the case of the Black Death, what did happen was that fleas transferred the disease to humans when their ratty little hosts, usually the black rats, died. And the humans would usually become sick from the plague about 2 to 6 days after infection, and then they could spread it to other people through close contacts. So, the fleas would jump from their new host to a new host like they did from the previous host. So, this sounds a little familiar to me, given our current situation. Now, I know the Rona isn't spread through fleas, unless there was another address I missed from our fair president, in which he uses his medical degree to further enlighten us.
Get your plague masks out, everyone. Poppies for you.
I want one, though. I want a plague mask. Same.
You better cut your arm. Make sure you bleed all that out. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Keep those humans going.
Leeches for everyone.
Oh my gosh. So the Rona is actually closer, allow me to stress closer, to the spread of the pneumonic plague, which can be spread from person to person by infectious droplets. So, through the air when you cough. Hey, that sounds familiar.
Weird.
So weird.
Dark times we're living in.
However, there's a lesson to be learned from the plagues that wiped out about 20% of London's population every 20 or so years in light of our current situation, and that's this. Stay home unless absolutely necessary. Wear a mask in public, if not for yourself, then for others, or vice versa, whichever way motivates you selfish people. Wash your hands, you filthy animals. And thank your essential workers out there helping others in a multitude of ways, both physically and mentally. Anyway, back to the plagues of London. Woohoo! Once infected, 60 to 80% die, and most of them died pretty quickly, within a week. The infected would develop a fever, become weak, have headaches and chills, and they'd develop swollen lymph nodes, which are referred to as buboes, hence the bubonic plague. As these buboes are swollen lymph nodes, they would form in the armpits, the neck, the groin, the really fun, nasty places.
All the hot
Where you
spots.
want lumps.
Yep. I love lumps on my groin. Not a good sign in any situation.
Nope. There were so many plague victims that they couldn't keep up, so bodies were dumped in mass graves, aka plague pits, stacked on top of each other, sometimes 5 deep, and children, the saddest part, were laid in the small spaces between the bodies of the adult dead.
Aww.
I mean, at least they were, cradled in death, but that's so sad!
The little guys.
Oh, gosh, yeah. So since the dead bodies were piling up so rapidly and people were
It's
just...
like Tetris.
We're really morbid here if you haven't figured that out.
Welcome to the dark side.
Oh, gosh. So, people were just trying to survive without getting sick, and some of the plague pits have been lost because the records weren't kept that well. And so, depending on who you ask, the number of unknown locations of these mass graves is actually quite high. Any empty land or land that has sat unused for too long is often said to be so because they contain plague pits, according to local rumors. And not only that, but there are also rumors that the Underground Railway, more commonly...
Not the railroad. That's a different country.
I know. When I first read that, I was like, Underground Railroad. I still can't say it. Anyway, that
Different
thing,
thing.
aka the tube,
Yeah.
comes through and by plague pits. So if you're ever on the tube, look out for the dead plague bodies.
And mind the gap.
And zombies.
All of those things. So next we go to Blackwall Point. Public hanging of pirates was actually carried out over the Thames.
Pirates!
At a place referred to as Execution Dock, and then they would later be moved to Blackwall Point after the water was allowed to get to them for a bit, so they were nice and soggy and floaty and bloated.
Delicious.
I mean, they
Yeah.
were pirates.
Don't
In death
discriminate.
and in life. Salty and a little bit bloated.
Oh, God. Woo! Gosh. Okay, well, at Blackwell Point, their dead bodies were then left to hang high, rotting for everybody to see, displayed in cages like animals. So imagine the smell, though. Like the putrid...
I bet you the birds liked it. They were like, oh, yeah.
Oh, we'll get to the birds
Seafood.
We'll get to the birds later. Our next stop is Newgate Prison, one of the most infamous prisons, best known for its downright atrocious conditions. It was still open for business up until 1902.
Oh.
Yeah. It was bad. It was originally commissioned in the 12th century, so keep that in mind. And the prison languished in squalor for 600 plus years. It was reported that there were so many bugs layering the floors, lice and bed bugs, mind you, not exactly big bugs, so it would take a lot to layer the
I'll
freaking
take a spider.
floors.
I will take a spider or a cockroach over a bed bug any day.
I wish y'all could see my face when she said bed bugs. And immediately it went from okay,
Burn them
this
with
is-
fire.
Yeah, like don't even just
I will hold a spider in my hand
Oh, no.
over be in
I
a
still want
house
to.
that has a bed bug. A single one.
But imagine, how small those are, how many there had to be to layer the freaking floors. Like, I'm baby barfing in my mouth
That's
right
all
now.
crunchy when you walk.
Yeah, that's what they said. The floors, they said that the people's footsteps would crunch as they walked across them. That's nasty.
Get a broom.
For real, though. Oh, gosh. But the conditions of, the prisoners wasn't even better. They had, naked women screaming and drunk running around with their children in tow.
It's like college.
You're right, though. Some people have their kids with them. I mean. Oh gosh, but yeah, over 1,000 people were put to death there.
Oh,
over
not like
112. Over 112 years. But the really messed up part is a bellman from the Church of Saint Sepulchre. Yep, would go up and down
Is it sepulcher?
Sure, let's go with that.
Sepulcher?
They would go up and down the prison ringing the execution bell and chant the following: All you that in the condemned hold do lie, prepare you, for tomorrow you shall die. Watch all and pray, the hour is drawing near, that you before the Almighty must appear. Examine well yourselves, in time repent, that you may not to eternal flames be sent. And when saints' sepulchres, I'm just going with it, bell tomorrow tolls, the Lord above have mercy on your souls. He said that at midnight the night before they were going to be executed.
So
Catchy.
You're a douchebag!
Londoners seem to like their rhyming words.
Not wrong.
Lots of rhyming happening here. I'm seeing a trend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we have a small dog who likes to bark like she is a big dog.
I'm so sorry.
You'll probably hear my cats at some point too. We're a full house. It's fun.
It's a party over here.
Yep.
I should bring Maya.
I can bring the rats out. If we're talking about the plague, they'd probably be really interested in their history.
Honestly, I thought about it earlier. Not gonna lie.
No, Mary
not
Kate
the
and
right
Ashley.
rats, though.
No, Mary Kate and Ashley
They're
are
cute.
stars. They're actor rats. So unless I'd probably have to pay them to make an appearance on this podcast.
Give them a
So
Cheerio.
Cheerio.
they do
Bribery.
like Cheerios. They do like Cheerios.
Okay, so the next stop is Aldgate Pump, and there was an epidemic there where the water got contaminated. People first started complaining of the smell, and then hundreds of people died from drinking the polluted water because
If it smells, why would you drink it?
they didn't have another water source.
Ugh.
But water came from northwest London all the way over through various new graveyards, collecting bacteria
No.
from the decomposing bodies on their way, and then people drank it.
Corpse sludge.
Yes.
Corpse
Literally
sludge.
corpse sludge. Like you melt.
Ew.
You melt.
Oh no, you're all gooey and
Yeah.
dewy and achy.
Gooey and dewy. I like it.
Not in my drink. I'll stick to gin. Thank you.
Cheers.
So now we move on to the lore. Most of you know the Black Dog. You may know the Ill Omen as a
The
grim.
Mr. Potter.
I'm getting there. I'm getting
Oh
there.
my gosh, my queen.
Black Shuck or Chuck or Shug. There are multiple variations of that name.
Shug. It's a really
weird.
cute dog name. This is my dog, Shug.
Shug.
He's a death omen, no big deal.
But I want one though.
Yeah,
like
right.
I'm not gonna lie.
I just want a little farm of black animals. Little
Well,
black
yeah.
goats.
I had a black
cats,
cat
black
because I
dogs.
was like, I'm gonna love all the things that no one else will love, and everyone's like, don't cross the path of a black cat. And I'm like,
Oh,
mine, you're mine.
have you seen
Okay.
their little noses and their little feetsies? They're so cute.
Okay, my brother has a black cat, and I was redoing my room one time, and his cat came into my room, and of course there was a ladder because we were painting. And I have a picture of this little black cat laying under the little ladder. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, is he
he's-
bad luck or just adorable?
No, it counteracts each other,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And so then you just have a cute cat and a ladder.
Right.
It doesn't count.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
I didn't make the rules, Brie. I just follow them, okay?
Granted, I swear my brother stole that cat, but that's another story.
Ooh.
It's Candy.
Oh, we'll be there later.
So, getting back to the Black Dog, and what Catherine was saying, in more recent years, thanks to J.K. Rowling, as Padfoot.
Mr. Potter, it's in your tea.
So this beast of a black dog has many names and lore throughout Britain, including, and I'm so sorry, Scotland and Wales, because I'm going to butcher this.
Yeah, Wales is hard.
So Scotland, it's like Cusith or something, but there are accents, and it's probably wrong. I don't know. That's Scotland, and then like Gwilgy in Wales. It's G-W-Y. Maybe it's Gwilgy. I don't know. It's G-W-Y-L-L-G-I.
Oh no, there's a Gwilgy.
Some Welsh person, please correct me, because I'm insanely curious as to how you actually say this.
If you're a Welsh person and listening, that means we have listeners. So we'll take any criticisms you have.
For real, though.
But don't be too harsh because I have anxiety.
Same.
Me too.
We're all very anxious individuals.
But thank you for listening.
Oh, gosh. So, the black dog is portrayed as like a malevolent creature that represents an omen of death, as we've discussed. But the black dog is also portrayed in like positive ways. It can protect children, and then like
good boy.
I said, there's Padfoot and Harry Potter series, and who doesn't love Sirius Black? Come on now. So, next in our lore, Spring-Heeled Jack. I freaking love Spring-Heeled Jack, and I will tell you why at the end.
I'm going to talk about the Jack too.
I know. I thought about mentioning, like, it's not that Jack, guys.
To be continued.
So Spring-Heeled Jack in the 19th century, he was a creature, not a man.
Oh.
He was allegedly attacking young women in and around South London, and the creature earned its name from its ability to jump over buildings and other structures far and tall, like it had springs in its boots. Oh, it gets better. Wait till my description, guys.
Wait, he's wearing boots, but he's a creature.
Wait for it.
Oh, he's so proper.
In some reports, it is London in the 19th century. Come on. In some reports, Jack would have metal-clawed hands and bat-like wings, and the creature was also said to have the ability to breathe blue fire. Whenever I hear of Spring-Heeled Jack, for some reason I get this picture in my mind of Edward Scissorhands and go-go boots with springs on the bottom. Like those bouncy monstrosities you could, like, strap on your feet as kids to bounce around.
Moon shoes.
Yeah, or like some, like, Go-Go Gadget or freaking
Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, like one of those. And so, and then I also picture him with, like, this glorious drag-like makeup with these amazing ice blue flames around his eyes.
It's just like Johnny Depp in drag. And
Oh my god.
Yeah, Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So, yeah, I don't know why, but that's what I picture, and it makes me giggle.
He is attacking.
It makes me giggle because Edward Scissorhands.
Bria's
was
had
not
3
his
sips of gin.
I didn't eat all day until I got here.
3 sips of gin.
I just can't talk. I'm not a performer, dang it.
Sorry.
I literally had to stop like 4 times.
I know, I'm just like, I'm going for it, full steam ahead,
Go.
we ain't editing it. Anyway, I refer to Spring-Heeled Jack as a creature rather than a man because of the many strange theories surrounding his identity, including that good old SHJ was an alien that got left behind on our fair planet. Yes!
I just swooned.
The truth is out there!
So, his true identity wasn't ever discovered, but his legacy lived on in newspapers as a term used to refer to any strange-looking guy
my gosh,
that attacked women in the street.
He's the British version of Dr. Frankenfurter.
Yes! Oh my god, he really is, though.
Yeah, he's the British
Like
version.
how I picture it. Oh my
He's
gosh.
from transsexual Transylvania. Yes, good for you.
I've been listening to that soundtrack all week.
Jack, so good.
Okay, so next we have the Tower Ravens. I'm almost done, I swear. And usually our ravens are seen as ominous bad omens. That was a bit repetitive, but whatever. In fact,
We know vocabulary.
did you know that a group of ravens is called an unkindness or a conspiracy? Now, doesn't that just give you the warm and cuddly?
I thought it was called a murder.
Nope, that's crows.
Oh.
Yes,
Spooky.
I love them all. I'm just like, give me all the creepy weird
They're all
things.
the smart birds, too.
They are.
A murder.
Yes. I love an unkindness. I don't know, that just, every time I hear it, I'm like,
That's so
yes.
cute.
It is!
I mean, I'm always down for a good conspiracy.
Also that.
Yeah.
And they're just like birds, and they're just like sitting there, and we're like,
Little conspiracy birds.
They really do, though. Like, they look like they're conspiring. They're just sitting there.
they know things.
They
okay?
do. They do.
They're smart.
know
Uh-huh.
things.
They have the sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many senses birds actually have.
Birds have 47 senses. The 6th one is the ability to know all conspiracy theories. They're like Reddit.
Oh my god, yes!
They're like Reddit, but birds.
Okay. So the ravens in the Tower of London are a completely different story. They're not, like, shooed away, but they're welcomed and practically begged to stay because the lore states that if there are not at least 6 ravens that stay at the Tower of London at any given time, then the monarchy and the tower itself will fall.
Oh.
6 is very specific.
Oh, wait.
Do they count them?
I'll get there. So this lore allegedly started with King Charles II when an astronomical observator whined about the ravens and said they were interfering with his work. And so King Charles was like, yo, kill them all. But someone stayed his hand. And he was told that the tower in his kingdom would fall to ruins if the ravens did not remain at the tower. So he
Yeah.
decided, just to be safe, as a sort of extra insurance policy apparently, that at least 6 ravens needed to stay there always to avoid a major calamity. Now, doesn't that sound like a freaking, like, king? Like, yo, if the ravens leave, then we're all dead. So I'm going to keep 6 of them. Just
why
in
6?
case. I don't know.
It was his favorite number.
Clearly.
It's King Charles. Who knows?
He was like, 1, 2, 3,
as
4,
high as
5,
he can
I was gonna say, this is how I was thinking out.
5 and a half, 6. 6 birds.
6 whole birds.
Actually, today they have 7.
Ooh.
Yeah. So they said at least 6. So they've
Yeah,
got
that's
7
fair.
right now.
So in case
and you
one
want to know
dies.
their names?
Yeah!
I knew you guys would love this. So
They have names!
in alphabetical order, Aaron Grip with 2 P's.
Ooh.
Harris, Jubilee, Merlina, Poppy, who is the newest, right? And Rocky. I died. I know. I was like, oh, Rocky.
Birdies! They're so smart. They protect the monarchy.
I think my favorite name is Harris. It's just so cute to picture a raven named Harris, and it sounds like such a mature name or like one of those adorable baby genius names. So what are you guys' favorites?
Well, Poppy is cute.
I know, right?
Poppy's adorable.
Poppy is so cute, and I feel like she's like really fun, and she's like really in the know, and like the other birds are like, wow, have you seen Poppy's feathers today? Like, that's Poppy, you know?
She's the hottest new thing.
Uh-huh.
She's just slaying her job. She's a young independent bird who made it to the top of her field. I'm really proud of her. That's why I like Poppy.
Okay. That
I
was
mean,
really in depth.
I'm a fan of Merlina just because it sounds like a nice olden wizard name.
Yes, that's what I thought too. I was like, oh,
Merlina
you're Merlin for a girl.
Merlina.
So
She's gonna cast a spell on you.
yes. Apparently, though, like they can occasionally be dismissed for bad behavior. Yes. So one such raven was named George, who served for approximately 11 years before his conduct was deemed unsatisfactory, and his service therefore no longer required.
I know a George
So,
like that.
I want to know what George did to get himself kicked out.
He's pecking people,
Little
obviously.
troublemaker. I think they said he like dive bombed TVs or something. Yes, George. Yes.
It's a conspiracy theory. TVs are evil. They're brainwashing. I get it, George.
Yep. So, in order to prevent them from flying away, you're not going to like this.
Oh, no.
They would clip their wings so that they don't
Oh.
have enough balance in flight to get too far, and they say it doesn't hurt them, but I'm not
Okay.
sure how I feel about
I
that.
used to own birds, and it's true.
Okay. I
Yeah.
know that like people do that and worse all the time, but
It's not bad because it's literally like cutting your hair, but your
Oh.
hair would sprout and you would
so is
fly.
it just like the feathers? It's not
Okay,
like actual.
no. Imagine it like your fingernails. You can trim down your fingernails so that way you don't scratch things.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you clip it too close, you would get into the nail bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that with wings, and so the wing itself has a vein through it,
Mm-hmm.
but they clip it so it doesn't snip it.
Okay.
And so it's like trimming down your fingernails so you don't scratch things. They trim down the wing so that way they don't fly away.
Okay.
Poppy.
Because we had to do that with my birds all the time.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt them at all. It just makes it so that way, you know, when your 2 parakeets try to escape and fly on top of your ceiling fan, they don't get on top of your ceiling fan and try to dive bomb and kill themselves.
No.
Well, apparently they can still like sometimes make a jailbreak, even with a clipped wing.
They can still like soar. So if they're in a high place, they can
Yeah,
still
they
just
can.
kind of like glide
Well,
down.
there was
We're
one
so
named
ready.
Grog. Yes.
Fly.
And he was at the tower for like over 2 decades, and he
Grog.
escaped in the 80s. And guess where he was last seen, guys?
Where?
Outside of a pub, which is fantastic and hilarious. And I was like, "You do you, Grog. You go get you some of your namesake."
Grog deserved
some
a
Grog.
He deserved a nice retirement, okay? He dedicated 20 years of service.
Grog needed to get him some grog, but I like wonder if they put out a bolo, considering how important they are. Like the
Have you
ravens are
seen-
so important in London lore.
Have you seen this bird? Grog.
Last seen in a pail of grog.
Looks like a bird.
He was getting sloshed.
Aw.
So yeah, that is my London history and lore, and I hope you guys take the chance to go visit some of those creepy sites.
Yay.
All right, we now take a turn to the spooky side.
Ooh.
We are going to the Theatre Royale on Drury Lane. Yes. Yes, I thought about
That
the Muffin
Drury
Man.
Lane.
Do you know the Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man!
The Muffin Man!
Oh, little Drury Lane!
Well, she's married to
The Muffin Man! Yes, that went through my head the entire time I was researching this.
What an iconic film scene.
Man, I love Shrek.
So good.
But not like in a kinky way, but in like
I mean, I might look at it.
I'm not judging people who
Don't
sexualize.
kink shame.
I'm not. I mean, okay, I'm sorry. I'm a little drunk. I'm sorry. I have finished my drink. It's fun. Anyway, so the Theatre Royale is a part of London's West End.
Ah.
Yes. So a little bit of history. There have actually been 4 buildings on that plot, dating back to 1663. It caught fire in...
Of course it did.
Hashtag London.
Yeah. If it's there, it caught on fire.
It caught on fire.
Dang, London.
In 1672, and it was rebuilt larger. And yeah, as they do. In 1791, it was demolished to be made larger. Yeah, and reopened again in 17...
That was America's job.
I was about to say.
We got it from somewhere.
Bigger's not always better.
Hashtag bigger in Texas. What?
Yeah.
And it opened again in 1794. That did not last long because it burned again.
Man, London, for a city that rains so much,
I
you'd think
know.
stuff wouldn't catch on fire.
They
I know.
kept building stuff out of wood. Like, stop.
I know.
So pretty, though.
They did stop in 1809 because it was built one final time and reopened in 1812. That makes it the oldest theater site in London that is still in use. Fun fact. The author Tom Ogden claims it is one of the most haunted theaters in the world.
Yay!
Now I trust Tom Ogden because he writes books on haunted things.
Yay!
Thank you, Tom.
He knows what's up.
Right. Now, why we are here.
It's really hot in here, guys.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. My boobs.
I'm sorry, I'm a perfect female specimen.
Guys. It's true. Okay,
Seen it.
anyway, ghosts!
It's a ghost!
It's not my dog, it's a ghost.
It's a dog ghost.
It's the Grim!
Full circle.
She used to be all black.
Was she old?
Okay, anyway, some ghosts. So, us theater people, we are,
That's me.
yeah, we're a little stitious. No, we're superstitious.
I'm not superstitious, I'm just a little stitious.
Yeah, well, we're all a little stitious. And of course, I think every single theater I've ever performed in has had some sort of ghost.
At least one, or it doesn't count.
Right. It's not a legitimate theater unless it has a ghost.
For real, though.
This one has multiple. There are a few minor ones, and then I'll talk about the major one. So, here we start. Charles Macklin was an actor who appears in the corridor near the spot where he killed another actor, Thomas Hallam, in an argument over a wig.
That is the most theater boy fight I've ever heard.
I mean, I've had some wigs that I would easily fight someone over, but
I have seen it happen backstage. You don't mess with people's wigs.
If
No.
I could wear a wig, I'd probably fight someone over a wig. But my hair's too big. It sticks out.
I love a good
It
wig.
doesn't fit.
But he allegedly shouted, "God damn, you for a blackguard, scrub, rascal." Then he thrusted a cane into Hallam's face and pierced his left eye.
Ooh.
Gosh!
Rough.
For real!
There is a ghost of a clown named Joseph Grimaldi who allegedly...
Hard nope.
No. He allegedly helps nervous actors and will guide them on stage.
I'll die.
I
first.
would rather
I'll
die.
That's so
You better throw
awful.
something and pierce my eye, because I'm not dealing with the clown ghost.
But he's so nice.
Remember a couple years ago when there were just, like, clowns everywhere?
Oh my gosh.
Back home, they would like attack people and mug them and like kill people.
Ugh. Okay.
They had murder clowns.
Ugh. Okay.
What a time to be alive.
Another ghost, the ghost of Dan Leno, allegedly gave comedian Stanley Lupino a visit in his dressing room.
That's nice.
It is nice.
That's a little pervy.
Did you bring him flowers?
No.
No.
He just scared him.
He was like,
Which
hey
is
man,
like,
break a leg. And he was like, ah, ghost.
yeah.
That's what happened.
And they're like, peeping Tom.
Okay. Then we have the most famous ghost. This is the big boy. He is called the Man in Gray because we do not know his name. However, there is a lot about the Man in Gray.
50 Shades of Man in Gray.
Hey,
Greg
girl.
Kinky baby.
He is always dressed as an 18th century nobleman in a three-sided hat with powdered hair, a dress jacket and cloak, riding boots, and a sword.
Ooh,
A sword?
a sword.
According to some, he has a limp, but that was pretty inconsistent.
Well, he's a ghost.
I know. Like, I just figured they kind of glided along.
But he had a limp before he died, and so it just kind of hung
How do
with
you
him.
limp when you glide, Brie?
Through the air? You
Please, no,
There's like
please.
a little hitch in the
Yeah,
glide.
it's a hitch in your step. He got a little hitch in his get up.
He's not Southern, honey.
Hey, we're in Texas. When in Texas.
We're in
Don't
London,
do
sweetie.
Texas. Physically.
Anyway, his body was actually found during the renovation of a side passage in the 1870s, wearing the clothes resembling the apparition, but with a dagger through his rib cage.
Oh, I was gonna say he got lost, which I would do. But nope.
He just got bricked in by accident.
No,
Whoopsie.
well, maybe not by accident. He was apparently bricked into one of these side passages.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It was Edgar Allan Poe. He did it.
Ah,
I know.
yes. It's also an
With
episode of
Amaretto.
Buffy, so I'm just saying.
Yes, but he is not a shy ghost.
Oh.
He will literally appear for almost anyone, including like during daytime, especially during daytime.
Well, if he was an actor, that makes a
was
lot of
gonna
sense.
Hey, he likes
Yeah.
attention.
Never, never miss a chance to perform.
But he would appear for stage managers, which is typical. Actors, typical. Other Theatre Royale staff, typical.
Gosh, the stage manager is like putting out the ghost light, and you see an actual ghost, and you're like, man, like it's not why they named it a
Yeah.
ghost light, but I get it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Audience members would see him, and firemen.
Fireman.
Because everything's burning.
I was gonna say it's London.
It's
Why did I
London.
even question that?
London's burning down. It's fine.
Always.
Well, their smoke detectors are very sensitive. As someone who accidentally set off a London smoke detector when I was taking a shower, and the steam set it off, and they were all like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Just trying to take a shower." And it was terrifying, but they were really nice.
Were they hot?
I was traumatized. I don't remember.
I would have noticed.
Traumatized. So close your shower doors when in London.
I mean, I set off my fire alarm when I'm cooking, so
Same, but that's because I'm a bad cook.
yeah, mine's just sensitive. I have a sensitive little fire alarm. He needs some encouragement. Anyway, the man in gray will frequently appear across the upper circle, cross, and then disappear. He will
He's doing
sometimes
his blocking.
exactly. He will sometimes sit in the audience, specifically the fourth row on the end in the upper circle.
I saved a chair for my dad on the fourth row on the aisle. It's Olive's dad.
That's
I
cute.
never put that together. Oh my
Can
gosh.
we meet him? I want to meet him.
I know. Oh, we need to go to London again.
Yep.
Spelling bee shout out.
Yes. Anyway, one time when he did this, a cleaning lady thought that he was an actor, sat down to talk to him, and then he disappeared and reappeared across the theater.
Ooh.
Rude.
He's ghosting her.
Rude.
That's fantastic.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we thespians are a little suspicious folk, and the man in gray marks the beginning of a successful run at a theater.
Aww.
I know. So he's another good ghosty, just like the clown, even though he's a little scary as a clown.
I want to meet the gray man, not the clown.
The 50 Shades of Grey man.
Yeah. Ooh, yes,
Daddy.
Daddy.
Yes, Daddy, always.
Ew.
Yum.
All right, so this is Catherine, and I'm going to do the true crime dark side of things, which is obviously very dark because these were real people. So something I'm going to try and be conscious of is using victims' names a lot, just because it is sad, and all the victims this week have a name that I also have, so it's really fun. So, we are doing the infamous Jack the Ripper.
Ooh.
Yes.
I
Ooh.
love Jack the Ripper.
So many theories.
Yes. So, people are still fascinated with Jack the Ripper, and there's a whole study of him called Ripperology, and people call themselves Ripperologists. That is not me. I have not dedicated my life to researching them, so I'm sure some of you have your own theories and your own thoughts, which is awesome. Good for you. Here's mine. So there's no conclusive proof still of who Jack the Ripper was, Despite some incorrect DNA and much speculation, that's kind of part of the mythology that surrounds Jack, and I think it's why he's still so intriguing to us today. He's one of the most famous serial killers of all time. His dark story still is the inspiration for countless books, movies, shows, songs, plays. There's a really excellent episode of Psych where it's a Jamaican Jack the Ripper, and it's excellent. So he is everywhere, still to this day. And if you're listening to this, hopefully you know what a serial killer is, but a serial killer is someone who killed more than one person and at separate times, versus like a spree killer who goes off and tries to kill as many people at once. But so serial killers kill more than one, and they do it over a period of time. And Jack has killed 5, for sure, and that's what we are going to talk about. Victorian London really got on the true crime train, and they were one of the first societies that we have documentation of people loving like morbid and gory and macabre stories, and people went wild for it.
I love that word. Also, surprise London. Like,
yeah,
you're messed up.
Well,
like
to be fair, everything is terrible for them at this time.
Right,
so,
right,
like, in this area especially, I get it, you know?
Also, the Penny Dreadfuls, like,
yeah, Penny Dreadfuls came out, yeah.
I love the Penny Dreadfuls.
So interesting, and, like, serial writing became a thing, and newspapers were reporting on everything, and I mean, journalists were getting involved. Everyone knew the name, and it actually created a worldwide media frenzy, which is the first time a true crime case has really like gone global, and people were speculating and reading about him in other countries. So we're gonna start with the victims, and so this all started in 1888 in the Whitechapel district of London. This area was extremely poor. People lived very, very close together in slums. We're talking like 11 people in a single room, flat. We're talking people living in like shanty towns and tents. People are crammed in. Close quarters, never a good thing for crime. So, many women at this time turned to sex work just to get by, and criminal activity was super prevalent in the rundown and dirty streets of the area. It's a rough crowd, okay? All sorts of crimes happening, which makes this stand out even more about how horrific it was, because people were, you know, getting murdered, but it was like, hey, that's mine, don't touch that, stab. It wasn't this serial kind of creepy motive behind the scenes sneakiness that's happening with Jack the Ripper, which is why even people in this area were so horrified about what was happening. On August 21st, Mary Ann Nichols was 42, and unfortunately her body was found. She had been beaten in the face, her throat had almost been severed by 2 knife slashes, and her stomach had been cut open by numerous slashes. Mary Ann is now considered Jack the Ripper's first victim, number 1 in the canonical 5. The canonical 5 are what experts believe are the 5 true victims of Jack, but some people argue that there were 11 women murdered by him in the Whitechapel district. So 5 are like confirmed attributed to him, but there were 11 murders that people can argue. And this is in the Whitechapel district, so if Jack was from somewhere else, there could have been more bodies, but they refer to the 5 women that I'm going to talk about as the canonical 5. So, Annie Chapman, 47, was found September 8th outside of 29 Hanbury Street, and her body had been even more viciously mutilated. Her throat was once again almost cut completely through, and her stomach had been slashed open, and her internal organs had been pulled out of her.
Oh.
They literally, like, grabbed her entrails and the intestines and pulled them up and, like, slung them over her right shoulder.
Oh.
So they're still attached to her corpse and pulled out, and there's a lot going on there. It's like, you know that magic trick when they pull the scarves? It's like that, but with intestines and pulled up over her shoulder. A piece of skin from her stomach was cut and placed on top of her left shoulder. And on top of the mutilation to the body, a section of her vagina and bladder were taken, presumably by the murderer. So that's something that's kind of new in this time for people to know that like body parts were being taken, which is something that we kind of think of now as like, oh yeah, serial killers do that sometimes. Souvenirs, yeah. But it was super, super icky at the time. I'm assuming it's been happening for all of humanity, because whenever there's humans, there's got to be a couple of unpleasant ones, but
Little wackos.
Yeah, not great. But this was really crazy that it was visible for the first time.
And documented.
And taking a section of a woman's vagina is a clear indication that something is not okay.
Can you say mommy issues?
Yeah, something. On September 30th, Jack killed 2 women within a few minutes of each other. And it is assumed his first murder was interrupted, so he had to change victims. So Elizabeth Stride was found with her neck wound still actively bleeding. So this woman was literally minutes away because her heart was still pumping enough to be getting blood actively coming out of her.
Yeah. Oh
so
my
she,
gosh.
like, someone stumbled upon Jack the Ripper killing her. And so she didn't make it, but he was interrupted. So her corpse was not mutilated like the others. 45 minutes later, the body of Catherine Eddowes, 43, was found just a short walk away. So this place is crawling with cops, and he has to still commit a murder, like literally like 2 streets over. 45 minutes, and he found time to do this to her. Her throat was slashed, her body was ripped open, her eyelids, part of her nose, and part of her right ear had been cut off.
Oh.
Yeah. Her entrails were again placed over her right shoulder, so that's something that continued. Her uterus and left kidney were removed and not found.
Oh.
So before it was part of her bladder
And vagina,
Yeah,
but
and-
bladder could easily be nicked and carried away. Now it's uterus
and kidney.
and kidney, which they're all kind of in that
Yeah.
abdomen
Yeah.
area. That seemed to be what he liked. And again, it's really interesting that her entrails were over the right shoulder. So, like, that is something that consistently happened to 2 of his victims. So that's obviously important to him. The sick son of a bitch. So, Jack's last canonical victim was Mary Kelly, and she was only 25. And the age difference, so these were all sex workers in the Whitechapel district, the rough and tumble district. But the other women were in their 40s, and Mary was only 25. And so that's actually really important. Also, Mary was found in her bed, in her house, and not on the streets like her previous victims. So these other victims were all literally left on the street, which also says something. Mary was in her bed when she was attacked, and she stayed in her bed.
Oh my goodness.
It makes you think that maybe there was a more personal connection there.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the theories has to do with that, because she is different than the other ones that we know of.
she's almost half their age.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that she's in her bed is really interesting, and we're going to talk more about that. So, whether because he had the most time with Mary, or because it was personal, or he just was getting more comfortable with his own sick killing style, she had by far the most mutilation done. So her throat was cut, her nose and breasts were cut off and literally placed on a table.
Oh.
Like, cut them off.
Like they were like displayed.
He, like, put them on a table next to her. Her entrails were completely pulled out, and some of them were draped over a picture frame.
So
Oh my
personal.
gosh.
100%
Yeah.
personal.
She had been skinned,
Oh, gosh.
and the killer took her heart.
That was personal.
Yeah.
You can't tell me it's
Oh.
not.
So Mary was, horrible things happen to all these women, but Mary, I don't know why, but the skinning is by far the grossest part to me. Like, it takes time and precision
Yep.
to skin someone.
And it's so messy.
Well,
It is messy.
Technically, if you do it right, it's not supposed to be messy. But there was a lot of blood, and there are some photographs and image descriptions of this, and it's pretty horrific. Like, this woman, it's hard to tell that she's a woman. She's,
Oh my gosh.
like, there is more outside of her body than there is inside of her
Well, and
body.
it takes so much time to skin something.
Yeah.
Little backstory. I used to work at a vet clinic, and so for surgeries and things, we'd have to, like, skin a small section. And it takes a lot of precision to cleanly skin an area.
well,
But to get... I mean, human skin is thick. Like, like a cat skin, whenever you're trying to just, get to an area, it's thin. A human skin is thick.
Well, and what's really interesting also was that police at the time, who, let me tell you, were working their very best case that they could for not having DNA and actual forensics. That's a new thing. Mm-hmm. And the men down at the Scotland Yard were working their butts off, and they really did try their very best. And they figured that it was probably someone who was a barber or a butcher or someone with medical knowledge, because I meant inside of a woman's abdomen, it's kind of hard to tell what's what.
Right.
And he was able to get specific things. I meant your heart, it's kind of easy to tell where that is. Mm-hmm. But, everything else seems to show some precision, or at least some understanding. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the things that they put on that for potential suspects could be one of those. So those are the 5 women, known as the Canonical 5, they're all attributed to Jack the Ripper. There are more names, and unfortunately in the time there were a lot of people that were dying in dark ways, but I'm going to focus on them for today. So something else that people get really excited about still are the letters that Jack the Ripper wrote. There's so much to this case that I'm kind of just skimming the top, but I want to talk about these 3 letters that are the most popular ones. There were a couple other ones. There was the writing on the wall that blamed the Jewish immigrants for Jack the Ripper's murder, but we're not going to talk about that because I don't want to.
Fair.
So several letters attributed to Jack the Ripper, including the one who names him. So this is really interesting for me as a modern person, because Jack the Ripper is a name that some people think he gave to himself, but most people think was a journalist who gave him the name Jack the Ripper. So that's really interesting. So this is called the Dear Boss letter. And that letter was received on September 27th at a newspaper that was signed, and it was signed Jack the Ripper. And it implied more murders were coming. Jack the Ripper promised to cut off an ear of a lady and send it in. This letter is believed to be written by a journalist to create more media frenzy, though Jack did nick Catherine's ear. So this letter came before Catherine was killed, and she had a nick in her ear. So some people are like, it was actually written by him. I'm in the school that most people are now, that a journalist wrote this to try and get more press. They were able to give this faceless menace a name, which kind of ties him into other things. And it could have been an accident, or he could have read the letter in the newspaper and decided to cut her ear and be like, ha ha ha, look, I read the newspaper too. The next letter was called, it was a postcard, and it's called the Saucy Jackie letter. All 3 of these are incredible names. The Dear Boss, the Saucy Jackie, and then the From Hell letter. All incredible. And probably written by journalists.
Yay,
you can't get awesome words like that from, I feel like the serial killer didn't write them, I feel like that's a writer's job right there. Anyways, the Saucy Jackie letter referenced the previous murders and talked about a double event. So, this one is also probably written by a journalist, but what's really interesting is that there was a double murder after this letter came out. But they kind of happened simultaneously, if that makes sense. So the bodies were found, and in Whitechapel, it's so overcrowded, and between word of mouth, by the time the newspaper was published, everyone knew about it too. Do you know what I mean? So they kind of happened simultaneously. So someone probably got it, wrote it right away. And those two seem to have the same handwriting. And then the From Hell letter looks really different, and it was delivered to the head of the neighborhood watch. That was called the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and it was a neighborhood watch in Whitechapel. And they had a lot to watch. And George Lusk was the head of that committee, and he got a letter and a box that contained part of a left human kidney.
It's the kidney.
You would think. And it was signed from hell, which is incredible, and
Yes,
also
I
how
was
I will
gonna
be
say.
signing everything.
Yes.
Work email.
From
hell. But there's a theory that this was a medical student playing a joke.
Douchebag.
So
Rude.
people were obsessed with this. Okay? It was live time. And so it was a left kidney. So someone knew it was a left kidney, had read that a left kidney was missing, and they sent the head of the neighborhood watch a left kidney. Okay? But they think it was a medical student, so he would have access to cadavers to study medicine, and he just sent him. And he said he ate part of it,
Oh
and
my
so I think that
gosh.
part of it. But I, you know, that sounds like a medical student joke. It's like, cannibalism, that'll get him, you know?
That'll get them.
Yeah.
I will never understand how people are like so into a case and they're like, I'm so into it that I'm gonna throw this red herring out there.
Yeah.
And like, you're not helping, you're making it worse.
Don't
How
do
do you
that.
actually care? And then,
Yeah.
ugh.
Well, I think people were just feeding off of how fascinating this was.
Sensationalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant-
Despicable.
It's like there are cases like Jean Benet and OJ. You know, there are cases that have completely stopped modern day to like focus on solely. So that's what was happening. Only everything was in print. So it timelines get a little weird because you can hear about things and have things posted differently. It's not like
Yeah.
you're watching something live on the news.
Yeah.
So all the letters are part of the mythology that surrounds Jack the Ripper, and it's an early example of journalists nicknaming serial killers, something we will see today. So naming serial killers is something that still happens a lot. There's so many of them. I'm blanking on several right now, but someone give me a serial killer.
A serial killer?
Yeah,
Oh,
with a nickname.
Now I'm blanking. The Nightcrawler. Serial
Nightcrawler.
rapist.
Yes.
Golden State.
Golden State Killer.
Weren't they
Who
thought to
they
be the same? Weren't they thought to be the same at one point?
BTK.
Oh yeah.
The Candyman. Thank God, I thought I forgot them all. But still, we give them nicknames that kind of are their MO. And the letters are still part of the mythology. So even if they weren't written by Jack the Ripper, they're part of like this romanticized version of him that we have. Suspects and theories. My favorite part. So,
boy.
Yay.
there seem to be 5 main suspects that are still considered, although some of the theories out there are incredible. Okay, go down that rabbit hole. I encourage you. Some of them are so ridiculous, and they're wonderful, and I love them. My favorite ridiculous one is Jill the Ripper. And Jill the Ripper apparently is a mad midwife. So she would have anatomical knowledge, and she'd be covered in blood, and no one would suspect her. But a woman does not match eyewitness accounts, and I watch Criminal Minds, so I can only assume the unsub is a male due to the sexual component of his murders.
Yes.
So, thank you, Criminal Minds. But, yeah, I don't know.
Dr. Reed.
Yes, Dr. Reed.
Favorite Reed.
My favorite. But I think Jill the Ripper is an awesome Halloween costume and not an actual theory.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to start with my favorite suspect because none of them are actually the real suspect as of right now because we have no evidence to any of them, but he's my favorite, so I'm going to go with him. Montague John Druitt, who came from a medical family, so he would have the anatomical knowledge that the police thought the Ripper to have. He was 31 at the time of the murders, which just sounds like a bad age, and was considered, and I quote, sexually insane. Not a good name. So it could either mean so either this guy was gay and everyone's like, oh, he's sexually insane, or he was a serial killer or a sex crime person. One of the two.
Yeah.
I think he's the mean kind. So a Scotland Yard officer that worked on it, McNaughton, thought Druitt was good for it. Druitt's body was found floating in the Thames in December of 1888.
Oh.
So just 2 months after the murder stopped, they found his body in the Thames.
So, like, self-inflicted kind of deal?
So people think it was
or-
suicide, but if he was clearly showing mental illness signs, it could be from other things. It could be from people suspecting him. It could be from guilt of him doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. But to me, there isn't any more evidence than that. But, like, if you find a body floating, it's never a good sign.
No.
Like, a floating body means something, and I don't know what it is. But, you know, that's real sketchy.
You're either careless murderers who don't know how to dispose of a body properly.
Yeah.
or-
So, I guess it could have been that he was killed because people thought he was the Ripper, or could have had evidence. So,
That's
I don't know. I think the fact that he died 2 months after the killing stopped is really interesting because everyone else lived much longer. And I don't think you just stop being a serial killer.
Right.
So,
Oh, no.
Walter Richard Sickert, I think.
Oh.
He was a Victorian British painter who might have been more than just inspired by the Ripper. Yes. So he had dark paintings, and they were like the Ripper was his muse, which is creepy, but also something a pretentious author or painter, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would have kind of liked his work.
Well,
in a
so people
secret
did.
Sort of way.
No, people did because it was so sensationalized that it was like part of pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
It still is.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it still is.
So he was inspired by Jack the Ripper, but some people think that a little bit too inspired. But it took 70 years for his name to be connected as a possible suspect. In 2002, Patricia Cornwell, so she's a crime novelist, and she bought many of his paintings and artifacts and tried to match the Ripper with Sickert with DNA.
Interesting.
But they could only use mitochondrial DNA, and nothing
The
ever...
powerhouse of the cell.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, high
Science
school.
teachers. They only had powerhouse of the cell DNA, but they couldn't connect him. But she cut his paintings in half to try and find hidden messages and stuff. But again, it was 70 years later that someone's like, I bet you he's Jack the Ripper. So I don't think he was Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
I think he was just kind of weird, like a weird uncle, you know. And you're just like, oh, okay, you do
get it.
paintings and stuff. Yeah,
I get it.
yeah, I get it. It's
Like
what
Owen from Parks and Rec.
Oren.
Oren, not Owen.
Mhm.
I'm drunk. I'm sorry.
So I don't think it's him, but I put him in there because weird paintings are always fun.
Yep.
So this is the one that most people probably think of when they talk about Jack the Ripper, and this is Aaron Kosminski. So he was a Jewish Polish barber.
The West Pies
Yeah.
in London.
Very
the West
Sweeney
Pies
Todd.
in London.
So you know he had his friends, and he could have possibly been also killing people, just like Sweeney. Another Johnny Depp character.
We love
We
our
love
Johnny.
Look at that, twice
That
in
was
one
a little
episode.
sexual. Yes, Johnny.
Ew! I hate the daddy voice. Okay, so we're talking about 5 women who were disemboweled.
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Okay.
So, he was a suspect at the time, which is really interesting because he's still a suspect. So, they couldn't clear him or anything. But Ripperologist circles still talk about him a lot, and he kind of is a front runner. But again, there was that really hateful anti-Semitic note that was written that it was a Jew, misspelled by the way, misspelled Jew, quote unquote. That may have pointed that it was a Jewish immigrant who were really common in London at this time who did it. So I don't know if that was pure anti-Semitism or if it's because someone knew that Aaron may have been involved. But he was taken to an insane asylum in 1891. So this is well afterwards, but he obviously was unwell in some way or another. In 2007, a Shaw purchased at an auction that was supposed to be a victim Shaw. Okay, so Jack the Ripper's victim had the Shaw on her. I think it was Catherine. But the DNA evidence is so broad that they got, so they tried to match his ancestors with ancestors of Catherine, who the Shaw was supposed to be, and tried to match it because there was 2 DNA on the Shaw to see if it was him. So it doesn't technically rule him out, but it also doesn't rule thousands and thousands of other people out. does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there was a whole scandal with it. Like, someone thought that it was like a different, it's like 0.14 or versus 0.15, like a genetic mutation in the DNA makeup. And the scientist, like, said the wrong one. He's like, it's a 1 in 1 million chance that it's not him. And everyone's like, yes! And he's like, oh my gosh, I had a typo. It's not that. So, super awk.
Taco.
Anyway, it's not him. And then, this is my last person, and I was kind of nauseated by everyone, so I have a lot of commentary. It's colorful. Lastly was Joseph Barnett, and he was a pig. So, here we go.
Oink, oink.
He was Mary Kelly's, like, live-in boyfriend. It says that they lived together and that he was in love with her, but I think that's just because they didn't have the word boyfriend. So, Mary Kelly's live-in boyfriend, and he was upset when she turned to sex work to make ends meet when he lost his job. So, she was literally supporting them,
Yep.
and he got very upset with her for using sex work to make ends meet and feed them and have them survive.
Well, it was Whitechapel. You didn't have a lot of options, and I mean,
and she's a woman in this time. She had no options besides,
Right.
Anyway, so she literally tried not to go into sex work like so many other women in this area.
Mm-hmm.
He lost his job. They couldn't afford anything. She turned to sex work, and he got mad at her. So the theory with him, and if this is true, he is disgusting, is that he murdered the other women on the street who were also sex workers to scare her out of being a sex worker. So he murdered, so if this theory is true, he murdered 4 women, mutilated their corpses. These are like middle-aged women. Like, these women have a lot of people in their lives at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Murdered them, mutilated their corpses, left them on the side of the street to die, to scare his girlfriend out of becoming a sex worker.
Which would play into the personal connection,
Yeah,
like we
well,
were talking about earlier.
so-
And the age difference.
yeah.
So, they had a fight 10 days before Mary's murder, and there's witnesses because everyone's so close together. 10 days before Mary's murder, and he moved out, right? So they fought, he moved out. Mary's still trying to live her life. Okay? Mary was found in a locked room. She was by far the most brutalized out of the canonical 5. And also, for those of you who do like Criminal Minds, the FBI have since done a profile based off of the crime scenes that they had access to, and he matches the FBI profile, but there's no physical evidence. And I don't think physical evidence will probably ever show up, just because they didn't understand DNA,
Yeah.
so they didn't save things in the proper manner for DNA not to decompose and break down, and so I don't think we'll ever know, which part of me is like, oh, that's so fun and spooky, and part of me is so angry because these women will never get any justice for them. So I wanted to start with them and then end with theories about who it could be. So my vote is not Jill the Ripper, but I think either Joseph or, what's his name? Montague. Yeah, Druid is his last name. I just call him Montague because it makes me think of
Romeo and Juliet.
But I was looking for his last name. I was like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. But yeah. So I think it's probably one of them just because one was found dead. And then the other one, it seems very personal. But they could never tell. So.
I wonder what was in the picture in the frame that her entrails were draped over.
I don't know.
Because it could point to...
Yeah, I mean, so many people have so many different theories, and everyone wants to argue their own. And I mean, there's been 2 different times DNA has been tried to link Jack the Ripper to one of the suspects. There's more. Some people said royalty was involved. Some, like it is an intense mythology.
Wasn't
that goes
there a
around
Johnny
Jack the
Depp
Ripper.
movie that kind of addresses that? Or is it a different man? A different actor? It's a Ripper movie.
There's so many.
There are a lot.
I want to say it's Johnny Depp, but
Probably.
there's a Ripper movie, and they really lean
He's not
heavy.
even British.
He's not.
He's from like Tennessee.
They
Hey,
really
don't
lean
love
heavy on
Tennessee.
like the royal noble doctor kind of theory.
Yeah, but I don't know. To me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless someone was specifically coming into the Whitechapel district just to kill people. Which
you would stand out.
you would stand out. You wouldn't like.
Because I feel like even the nobles wouldn't come to, get their prostitutes in Whitechapel because they've got their bougie prostitutes.
Yeah,
I mean,
You
who
know.
wouldn't want a bougie prostitute?
I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know, and I think that's why we're still so drawn to this.
Oh yeah, it's part of the appeal
Yeah.
for sure.
Because I don't think there's going to be an answer.
No.
And it's like even little Catherine, it's like, what are 10 questions if you could get the answer to, you would ask. I'm like, who's Jack the Ripper? Who is he? So it's super interesting, very sad. And there were 6 other women who were also murdered in the Whitechapel area at this time, but they seem to be more like
One-offs.
stab and run kind of a situation.
And if they weren't other victims of Jack the Ripper, like, that just shows how sad that time period in that area was.
Yeah.
That, like, such, like...
I'm honestly surprised there's this many mid 40-year-old women who are still out
alive.
and about. Yeah.
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 Because
What a rough time.
poverty, diseases, injuries, Jack the Ripper, a lot of things can get you.
Yeah.
A lot of things could get you. But yeah, so that is my skimming the surface of Jack the Ripper.
Okay. Well, guys, that was our episode on London. We hope you enjoyed your tour and you'll come see us again. And in the meantime, you should check out our blog and follow us on social media. Our blog is darksidetourguide.wordpress.com. You can email us at darksidetourguides@gmail.com. Yes, there's an S there. And our Insta is Darkside Tour Guides. So follow us and see what we have in store for you guys next time.
Bye!
Bye!
Hi, I'm Catherine,
Hi, I'm Carrie.
Hi, I'm Bree.
and we are Dark Side Tour Guides. We're a group of friends in Texas, and we really love the macabre and the morbid, and we're a little bit on the spooky side. And we are kind of bound together by our mutual love of travel. So we wanted to do a podcast that takes us to different cities around the world where we can talk about the dark side of things that maybe you don't get on a normal walking tour.
So I cover the history and the folklore. I've always loved folklore, all the stories that make up a civilization and how they can relate to the current situation. And I also got my degree in history, and as Catherine mentioned, I love to travel. So studying all of those things in various cities around the world just really interests me.
I love booze and booze. So I really enjoy learning about new cocktails and drinks. I actually really love wine and studying where everything comes from, but I also love ghosties. And as to quote The Office, I'm not superstitious, I'm a little stitious. I'm pretty sure that there is a ghost dog that runs around my apartment. I see him every now and then, and so I firmly believe in ghosts, and I love learning about the stories that they bring and the history that they embody in modern days.
And I love to eat, so by extension, I love to cook. And so I will be cooking meals that represent different cities from all over the world, made with local ingredients, because I have to. And I'm also going to be covering true crime, so a little bit more modern in some cases. But if you are interested in any of these things, we'd love to have you listen in. You can email us at darksidetourguides@gmail.com, visit our Instagram at darksidetourguides, or check out our blog where there will be recipes, photos, and more things to go along with our cases at darksidetourguide@wordpress.com.